We're going to shake things up a little bit now. For the next half an hour to 40 minutes or so, we have a panel discussion with three wonderful artists who are part of our VR cinema program, Converging Sensibilities. They are Nyasha Kadandara, Espii Proctor, and Maria Belen Poncio. They represent the projects Lilac, Girl Icon, and 4 Feet Blind Date. And we're happy to hand over to them where they discuss the ethos and the ethics towards their creative practice, and the narrative and the substance, which is at the heart of their subject matters, and to welcome Tonya Nelson from the Arts Council, who will be moderating this session. So,
hello, everybody. Yes. I have to say, I'm really delighted to be chairing this session. I am the new Director of Arts Technology and Innovation at Arts Council. It's a new role, and part of what I'm going to be doing is really helping existing artists, but the next generation artists, use digital technology to create new types of experiences, new types of stories, and new types of perspectives. So as you can imagine, it's really great for me to have the opportunity to meet these great new emerging artists who've really pushed 360 video to talk about stories that we don't often hear about, and to give new perspective to different people's lives and experiences. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear from each of these artists who are going to do short presentations, 5 minutes, and then I'm going to use my power as a chair to ask a couple of questions first to kick things off, but then I'm going to open it up to you guys so that you guys can ask these guys the questions and get the answers that you want to hear. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Sadah Espii Proctor to do her presentation on her work, which is
Girl Icon.
Girl Icon, that's right.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. As it was said, my name is Sadah Espii Proctor. I am a VR director and sound media designer. I work mostly in theater and immersive experiences. I'm a Brooklyn, New York native, and I just want to talk a little bit about how I got into VR and where the roots of Girl Icon came from. So my roots in VR and actually came from performance. I started out in theater as a performer. I was trained to do documentary theater and specifically verbatim theater, which takes the source material that you get from interviews, from either audio recordings, and you use those exact words of the subject to be able to shape and create the narrative rather than interjecting an outside narrator's voice. The other thing I also did was a lot of ritual performance, in particular studying different cultural aspects of the African diaspora. Why this is important to Girl Icon is because for me, coming into VR, it's all about creating a story from the perspective of the subject, using the subject's words, preferably only the subject's words, to really create something that just takes you on a journey. And the specific thing is a journey. 2 projects that I had started out with doing, as you see on the left-hand side, was part of Building Home Ensemble, which was a group in the Appalachian region of Virginia. Together, myself and others, we shared stories of issues that people had in the region, whether socio or economic or racial issues. And we created a piece called Behind a Stranger's Face that focused on 4 stories of African-American residents in the region. I worked as a musician and a singer, and so there was a cultural exchange of bluegrass and tap and step dance and flat footing, and really using that to create a dialogue. The other thing that I did that helped me to come up was being part of the Bowery Birds Ensemble in New York. That focused on stories of young women on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and together we created and worked on an opera called the Wastemakers Opera that focused on the uprising of the 20,000. In New York, the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire is known for being a tragic event that sparked labor reform. But what a lot of people don't know is that a year before that, a group of young immigrant women on the Lower East Side protested for change in labor reforms. And so that story is focused on in the opera to just give context to what happened afterwards. So the project was part of Oculus's VR for Good Creators Lab, and it was created in partnership with Malala Fund and Milan Foundation. The film focuses on Rani Kanauja, 17-year-old who wants to become an army officer and finish school. The film focuses on the communities that support her in her journey in getting an education. So we have family and community, specifically her mom, her sister, and also the children of the neighbors that she has that she mentors and giving back to also encourage them to get an education. Her school and the activities that she takes part in, she does a peer mentor group. She also does karate and rollball, which was a thing that a new thing that we had learned. And also the Girl Icon Fellowship Program by Milan Foundation and Leadership in India that trains the girls over the course of 2 years to become grassroots leaders in their community. Things that the film focused on were the barriers that the girls faced in getting an education and the support systems that they have. There are institutional barriers and community barriers, and also institutional and community support that can counteract those barriers. From a VR perspective, we wanted to focus on creating a shared experience, to have the person who is viewing in the headset be a companion to Rani on her journey rather than taking on a first-person role, and to give a snapshot of Rani's life through these different communities. And one of the biggest challenges and questions that we always asked ourselves is, what is it like to create for an audience of one? Due to the limitations of VR, it can be an isolating event, but rather than pushing back against that, how do you really create something that is meant to be shared with just one person between whoever the subject is and the viewer? And lastly, I'll just leave with this quote. It's something that inspires me to this day, especially in theater and now in VR. The shortest distance between two people is a story. Patty did.
Thank you. Maria Belen?
Okay. I will stand up again. Okay, I am Maria Belen Poncio. I'm from Argentina. I'm the director of 4 Feet Blind Date. We are going to see a trailer to start so you have an idea of what it's about. Can we go to the presentation? Well, 4 Feet is a transmedia project that has VR content and also flat content. It's about an 18-year-old girl in a wheelchair. Her name is Juana, and she's in the last year of high school, and she's discovering and exploring her sexuality and her identity. But no worries, it's not a drama, it's a comedy, and it aims to de-dramatize disability. It aims to voice a minority and also to explore certain taboos that we are not used to talking or seeing. It's based on real experience. Rosario Perasolo is the lead writer and the co-creator of this project. She's 22 years old. She's in a wheelchair for some years now. And she's an activist for disability and has a really powerful perspective, different perspective of disability. So everything is based on her experience. A little bit of how this project began. 2 years ago, Ezequiel, the creative producer and also co-creator of the project, met Rosario in a TED Talk that she made in Córdoba, in our city. And he found this perspective was really powerful and proposed her to share her story and her point of view. And they started working together, and they invited me to direct the project. So here am I. I didn't have any idea of VR, any idea of disability, and maybe a little bit of idea of sexuality, but not more. And but I was in love with the project. I thought it was really challenging. And the most important thing for me of this project is to question ourselves and to deconstruct our idea of disability, of bodies, of beauty. And talking about women's sexuality is also very important for me. So we started working together as a creators team. I really like stories that go into minorities, into dissidencies, stories that we are not used to hearing or watching. But I think it's very important in these cases to include the protagonists of these realities and not talk of them from the outside. So this was our main goal, to include Rosario in all the process. This is a great team that we had for the shooting. And Rosario is the soul of the project. So she gives the authenticity to the project. And together we propose ourselves to make a project with social impact, a project that is a collective work, a collective creation with a lot of incredible artists involved. We wanted to talk about inclusion and diversity, but also do it, not only talking about it, and in an artistic and cinematic experience. For me, the relationship with Rosario is the most important thing. Sharing experiences together make me understand how it is to live in a wheelchair. And for example, the first time I lifted her to get into the car together, I understood how she every day has to trust blindly in other people and to have contact, physical contact with everyone. And then we have a scene in the film in which the guy lifted her, and I knew what it felt. So sharing with her was very, very important for me. Also, I come from a documentary background, so I thought it was very interesting to create situations in which we mix reality and fiction, and people around didn't know that we were filming. For example, in the bus, the driver is going to help her go out, and all these people that are outside, they were just like staring at this situation without knowing that we were filming. But this is something that happened to Rosario every day, like people staring at her because they are passing by and they stop. So I think these kind of situations were very interesting in the process. We also have this imaginary world of her thoughts and her emotions that is animation that goes into the reality. And this also is because we are questioning all the time what is reality and what is our perspective of reality, our perception of reality. We wanted this experience to be really intimate, so the camera is all the time very close to the character, and it's at 4 feet. It's like the height when you are seated in a wheelchair. You see the world at 4 feet. So this is the point of view of all the experience. And we wanted to invite people to live the world in a new perspective that we are not used to living, and to feel that you are rolling in the street like at 1 minute 20, as if you were in a wheelchair. It's so intimate that some people feel uncomfortable, and they told us that. But I think it's interesting that people feel uncomfortable, because if they feel uncomfortable, there is something behind this. Why is this making me uncomfortable? Because it's a different body, because it's something I'm not used to. I don't know. It's good to question these things. I like this picture because I think in a way virtual reality is like immersing yourself in another reality, and people trust us as a creator, and I think it's interesting for us to think where are we inviting people to be, in what realities we want them to be, and we have a lot of responsibility for that. This wouldn't be possible without the support of the Biennale College. They were the first who believed in this story, so we are very thankful with them. To finish, I want you to see a little words of Rosario that show the tone of the project that we're working on. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nyasha Kadandara. Thank you for joining us today and choosing us over Werner Herzog. So I have a film in the alternate realities program called Le Lac, which is a personified experience of Lake Chad told through the eyes of the lake. And I wanted basically the lake to be the main character, because when we think about especially climate change, we always think about how it's going to affect us as human beings in 50 years' time, in 100 years' time. And I'm really interested in different types of opinions. And I remember when I was a kid, there used to be this ad on TV where it was like a sort of like a UN summit, but it's just animals who come to it, and like the head of the summit is a rhino, and they come and they're talking about the impact of HIV/AIDS, and this is during the 90s, and they come and they talk about how concerned they are about the human race and whether they'll survive and what they need to do about it. And it's got giraffes and elephants and all of these different animals being like, we're very concerned about people. And I thought, I was still very young at the time, I thought that's such an interesting, I never thought that animals might have an opinion on what we do and how we live our life. And so that's why I thought, why not ask the lake what she thinks about what's happening to her? So for you, those of you who don't know that much, Lake Chad is centered in the middle of Cameroon, Niger, Nigeria, and Chad. Around 45 million people from these different countries depend on the lake. A lot of people around the lake identify with the lake and not necessarily a nationality. And a lot of the lake basically is this life source. And so what I wanted to do is explore what that lake was, who she is to different people, what moods does she have. So this is my first view of, flying into the Lake Chad region, which was about May of last year. And this was like sort of my first experience of seeing so many different islands, this vast body of water that I knew stretched for miles. And I was asking myself, who is she? And I came to see different, basically, aspects of it. So one is an oasis, basically, and I've always dreamed of, I come from a very, lush kind of country, lots of green, but, you read about oases in the books, and then you drive into the region, and then you're in a dry lake bed in 1 minute, and then the next minute you're in this lovely, lush area, and you see these trees and this life in the middle of a lot of, what seems like death. It's a source of nourishment for a lot of people. The lake provides a lot of fish for people. This is early morning and Tagal market. And people come in, the fishermen bring in their catch, and the women come and collect and then sell. And sometimes, this is on the Chadian side of the lake, but sometimes this fish will go all the way to Lagos. And there's just different sources of people. This is, a source of income for a lot of people. So just trying to figure out how many people depend on the lake and what that means. It was very fortunate enough to see these canaries who are just so beautiful. And this is a dried up lake bed, as you can see. So about 50 years ago, this would have been full, and right now it isn't. Currently, Lake Chad sits at about 10% of its original size, and it's been shrinking since the 1960s. So for me, it was this is a shot from one of my film, basically, where the cattle, because on the mainlands, basically, the area is the sort of vegetation is not as nutritious. They swim across the lake on their own, and they go and they find food on the islands, which are not very safe because of the Boko Haram insurgency, and then they come back at night, basically in the evening. And so I was very mesmerized by this place, but I was very shocked because I thought, at the same time, something's really wrong. Sorry, just skipped over this, dead camel and another basically dried up lake bed. So you can see that as much as there's a lot of life, there's also something very wrong with what's happening in terms of the environment. And then after basically figuring out what the lake was physically, what it looked like, the different aspects and shades of it, I needed to investigate, coming from a journalistic background, who are the people who live on the lake, who depend on it, what do they think is happening, how are they being affected? And I met many different people. This is Mohammed, who was a main character in the film, who I spent a lot of time with, who was a nomadic pastoralist who would have moved into Niger and back into Chad over like a year, basically, with his cattle. But his cattle are dying, and he's stuck in this area because the original area he's from has been taken over by Boko Haram. So he's basically, when I asked him where he was from, he was like, I don't know, maybe I'm from Chad, maybe I'm from Niger, I don't know, I just know I live on that island in the middle. And I really found that quite powerful because everyone has just said, we're lake people. And then I traveled north, basically, to a camp called Dar es Salaam, which is basically north of Bol, which is where a lot of refugees who've come from the Nigerian side, Cameroon, and Niger have basically sought refuge on the side of the lake. Nasiri was a fisherman on the other side of the lake. He was thriving, and now he's displaced. He was struggling to find opportunities to fish, but he finally gets to see this chance. So it was meeting different families like this, hearing their experiences of what had happened, and then also talking to them about how they left their home, in which so many people told me very similar stories of, being attacked at dawn, basically having to run with the little that they had for safety, and seeing some of their village members or family members basically being killed. And after I figured that out, basically, I decided, I took a few shots. I went back to Nairobi, which is where I live, and then I made a little trailer to come back and show people, because I wanted everybody to be on the same page of what I was trying to do, show them what VR is, explain to them why I'm going to be running away from them constantly and hiding in different places. It was trying to get them to see what the camera could see and what it meant in the space, and I thought it was really part of like bringing them into the experience of what I'm trying to do. And then the next task I had after all of this was trying to figure out a way to explain the insurgency. And I toyed with many different ways of doing this. And in the end, I remember being on the lake beds, and you would see these little dragonflies on the surface. And I thought of recreating that as like a black swarm, because a lot of people would talk about black flags, and when you see islands that have a black flag on it, it means it's been taken by the insurgents. Or if you see a boat, you know what it means. And so I sort of tried to represent that with the dragonflies and have them swarm towards you if you see the film. And some people tell me it makes them feel very uncomfortable because they feel like they're being attacked, which is what I wanted to convey, is a sort of a violation. And I also thought, from the perspective of the lake, how does she feel about having this type of terror happen on the lake? And one of the interesting things that people say is, one minute you're looking at climate change and how there's not enough water and the rain is not as much as it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And then you'll meet islanders who will tell you that when there's more rain, it's much easier for the insurgents to move around because of their boats. And so you have this conflict, like a catch-22. Do we get more rain so we can fill up the lake and we have bigger fish? But that also means that's easier for people to come and, torment us. And so, and another example of this sort of catch-22 conflict is that for people like Mohammed, who was a nomadic pastoralist before, has decided to become a farmer, and we see that journey for him. And he's sitting there and thinking, well, rain is good, but at the same time, too much of it will destroy my crops. And now this is what I have to do. And so it was very difficult trying to tell the story and like the complexity of that, but that's what I was trying to convey in the voice. And you see different feelings of how the lake felt. And the last thing I had to contend with at the end of the project was the conclusion of, will the lake live forever? Will it outlive us? Will it resurge in 500 years and there's a new planet? what will happen. I don't know, because I'm not an environmentalist or a scientist. I'm just another person on the 7 billion living here. And I think it's a question I want everybody to ask when you watch the film about our impact, our relevance in terms of what's happening with the environment. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, for those people who are waiting here, you can just feel free to sit down wherever there's available space. There's some seats right up here if you'd like to come in and sit down. So thank you all for your presentations. I mean, I was spectacularly impressed with all three works. Got to see them yesterday in succession, and I have a ton of questions, but I'm not going to be selfish. I am going to let the audience ask some questions. But I thought I would just kick off with asking the question about 360 video, which you've all used. Could you just say a little bit about how that technology, or how you think about that technology allowing you to tell your stories in the way that you want to tell them? What's distinct and special, and why did you choose that as a medium?
For me, I look at it as the next level of immersion. Mm-hmm. One of the challenges is in terms of like what people are paying attention to and how to shape that. But what I do find for me personally is that 360 video allows you to have presence in that location. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything in that location needs to have your attention. You know, I look at it as, you know, things that are within this point of view for me. This is within my direct attention. You're all in my direct attention, and everything else around me informs my brain of what scenario is happening. So in the room right now, all of you are sitting here, and while I may not be like wildly turning and flailing and looking at every single person, I know that I'm present here because I'm talking with you, and then there's a group of people that are staring at us in this way. Mm-hmm. So that frees up the pressure to, you know, grab all the attention and really then just focus on, you know, what is the story at hand, who or what is it about, and how to make that connection.
Yeah. Great.
Also, what I find interesting about not only sharing a story, but also sharing an experience, is that we usually perceive and construct our opinions of the world through the experiences that we have. So I think in a way, invite people to have these experiences that feel so real, widens our point of view of the world and how we think about the world. And it happened to me, like watching some experiences that sometimes I need to touch something in the real world because it really takes you there. So I think it's a very powerful medium, and we are responsible to taking people to a safe place where they can feel okay and where they can learn new things and feel new experiences. It's a lot about feeling too, not only seeing but feeling.
Yeah, for me, I think it's about trying the immersion and the immediacy and urgency that you get when you're put into a VR space. In the story I was particularly working on, it's very hard to get to the lake. There's lots of logistics you have to go through. And also when I just generally tell people, do you know that the lake is at 10% of what it used to be? It just sounds crazy. It sounds like I'm lying to you. And the only way is for you to really believe it is for you to be there next to it in the dry lake beds, for you to really believe, because I really want people to pay attention and bring attention to the cause. I just had to take the most extreme form, I think, of storytelling in that way.
Fantastic. And so when you're creating your narratives, because you mentioned that it's an audience of one, in a sense, how has that kind of changed your narrative making or construction of a story by having that singular, I guess, audience that you're catering to and trying to navigate that person through a space?
It simplifies how someone is immersed and interacts with the story. I know in immersive theater, for example, you know, if you have you might have audiences that, want to wildly engage in everything, and you might have someone that is a bit more passive, and, there's others that will engage when invited. Yeah. And so creating something for one person, whether it's like one of those three people or just one of those, it just, for me, it just narrows the focus down.
Yeah.
And it just cuts out a lot of the extra elements, and it just really, it's about establishing a connection between two people. With Ronnie's story, one of the questions that we had during the process and also during festivals was, so do I get to experience what it's like to be a 17-year-old girl in India getting an education? And the answer was just no. You do not. You are not her, and with all due respect, you will not be her. You'll never have that experience, and that's okay. What you can do is you can listen, you can watch, you can be there, you can even enter abstract realms where you have flashes of memory and whatnot that you can catch glimpses of to just get a little bit more into her insight on what it's like getting an education. But really, it's your companion.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the way that in the video, at one point, you're trying to make the distinction between her family life, school life, and maybe community. And so you have to, you see those insights as you're going around, you twist around, and I thought that was a really clever way of being able to introduce those parts of her life, how they don't necessarily intersect, but they come together in lots of different ways. I thought that was really good. You kind of used, in your direction, you would be looking in one direction at something, and then the next scene, you'd have to turn around to go and see, and you're like, okay, why did you choose to do it that way?
There are two scenes in which you start from what she is watching. So she is waiting in the park, and you are watching the park. And then, after feeling what she's feeling, you can also see her in the back. Yeah. So this was to play with the perspective. I think it's really challenging to guide the audience through the story, because as it is a new medium, everyone wants to look around and but I think the sound is very important in this point. Definitely you can guide with the sound. Yeah. And also the choreography around the camera, how people move. If you see someone that stands up here and go, automatically you will follow, because there is a movement, and other things are quiet. So it's getting using these things to guide people in a way.
And in your film, actually, there are several instances where the animals were kind of instantly right there. I thought that was really, obviously it was, you're like, wow, I'm right there. I mean, it really kind of, I think, proves your point about you wanted us to be there, and I felt very much that it was there. But were there any other conscious choices you made about how you're placing the individual in the context?
Well, I tried to use, and that's where we used animation, is to really get them inside the character, and I was trying to explain to the UN who were helping me facilitate my journey that I really wanted to have the camera under the water, and we start under the water and physically recording. They're like, it's just not safe and you can't do that. And I was like, but I really need people to understand who the lake is, who the characters, and I want to put them in the middle of the water, and then I want to put them above, and then I want to put them on each side, and feel every part of her body. Yeah. And so I couldn't necessarily do that with 360 video, and that's how I brought animation in to help people feel those different things. Yeah.
Fantastic, good. Well, I have a ton of questions, but I now can't be greedy, so I'd like to be able to ask the audience if they have any questions that they'd like to ask. And sorry, the light is so bright, I can't really see looks like there's a question in that corner. There's lots of questions, it looks like. There was somebody right there on the edge.
Hi, thank you for the nice presentations. I have a question for Maria, because when I saw your film, so I did not think about it as a documentary, and then I realized that it's selected for many documentary films festival. So how do you see your film, and where do you see the boundaries between fiction and documentaries?
Yes, that's a very interesting question that we also asked ourselves. And it's a little bit what I was sharing before. We truly believe that what you see in this experience is real, because it's real experience that the lead writer and co-creator has every day that is sharing. Of course, a lot of things are reconstructed, like rebuilt, but also keeping as much as we could these situations in which the surroundings didn't know and reacted as they usually react. So, of course, it's pushing the boundaries and asking ourselves now. I mean, I think we live in a moment that everything can be questioning what is real and what is fiction. But the important thing is that the experience is authentic, it's genuine, and it's actually taking you to a real place. Although you have an actress, but this actress made a lot of a process with Rosario to find the body that ends up being a real body constructed. But I think it's interesting to question also like these limits between what is fiction, what is documentary, and what can we do playing with both things.
Great. Thank you. Other questions? There's somebody right there.
Thank you for sharing your experiences with us. I have a question about if you can elaborate on each of your experiences of how you treat the camera objects in your stories. When you put a VR camera on a tripod, it's literally the head of the viewer in the headset later. So how do you talk to your actors or your characters about how to behave with that object? Do you ignore it and it's going to be a fly on the wall, or do you change your behavior and your physicality because there's an object right there who will be a person down the line?
In our experience, that we could control a little bit more the situation, we thought about it, all the people that were involved, as it was like a theater performance. So the camera is there, but like everyone is like making a choreography and using all the body, and like as the camera was not there, like that was what we tried to do. Yeah, more like a theater performance than traditional like filming shoot that you say, okay, I'm going to put the camera here for this part. It's like use the space, move around, and yeah, that's.
Any other?
For us, it was a combination between fly on the wall and another person. Fly on the wall specifically for the different panels that came up with each of those sections of family, school, and girl icon community. But also the camera was to be as though it's just like another person that's there. So when we were at the girl icon workshop with the students, you know, if they're sitting in a circle, we placed the camera as part of that circle. So it wasn't something that is meant to be like in the middle and everyone's like surrounding it. It wasn't meant to be an unnatural position. You know, when we're looking at Ronnie's parents, Ronnie's dad ironing clothes and Ronnie's mom folding laundry, it's just like it's just like if someone is standing or sitting next to you while you're doing an activity, and what is the most natural level for that activity, and then it's easier for them to just continue about what they're doing rather than focusing on this other object, because it just feels like there's another person that's there.
I come from a traditional documentary background, so I like to say to people, please ignore that I'm here, do everything as if I wasn't here. And so for me, I always tried to position the character when there were people sort of looking into their lives, so not in the center of it, because I didn't want the camera to then become the center of attention. So I'd always put it sort of on the periphery of, like if you saw in the film, the family are having lunch, and you're not inside the circle, you're not part of it, you're just on the outskirt outside, because you're an observer and sort of invited into the space, but you're not one of them.
Great. Sorry, how much more time do we have?
You have 4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay. Another question? Any other questions? Okay, good. That means I can go back to my questions. Which is, I wanted to kind of wrap up and end with, one, to talk a little bit about, I think you all come from backgrounds other than working in VR 360. So what kind of expertise did you have to develop, and what kind of expertise did you have to bring in order to do your works? Did you have to change your practice? Did you have to learn things? Did you have to bring in other types of people to help you produce your works?
For myself, with VR, a lot of it was learning about the equipment, and originally starting out with more like animated environments like CGI and Unity, and being able to build worlds in VR, and then the camera was a shift to just filming what's there. In terms of what I was able to bring from theater, experience as a performer and a designer in order to direct. As a performer, thinking about the body, thinking about presence, thinking about point of view, and how that influences the story, thinking about scale. If something is on a human scale, or something is meant to be literally a fly on the wall, like something very tiny, or something that's looming over what's happening, that also changes as well. And then in terms of design, how sound and visuals play a role, whether it's on a realistic level, when it's just a straight 360 video and we're looking at Ronnie through her different experiences, or when it's more abstracted, when we get into panels and sounds that come in and out and create this soundscape of what each of those worlds sound like to her.
Yeah, I think the technical aspects are a lot of learning. Fortunately, I had a great team that had experience in VR, so all the technical aspects, they helped me a lot with this. But also, I think as a new medium, it's a lot of trying and see what it works and what is not working, because it's, of course, a different grammar, like a different, you have to think, like the shots are, like there is no frame, so you have like a big frame. And it's a lot about feeling it and trying, also like leaving behind all like the things that we know for the flat format, and trying to explore new possibilities within the limits that you have technically. For example, I wanted closer to the camera, and the technical guys not possible because the stitching will not be okay. So you have like limitations, but also possibilities that you have to explore. For the actors, it's also a great experience, because it's more like with all the body, and they don't have like to act only with the face, only with the hand. And for this choreography, it's very interesting to explore and see how it works. Yes. Yeah.
I think I had to exercise a lot of letting go and not being in control of everything, particularly being on the ground. For me, I'm used to working by myself. I shoot, I edit, and I don't have that much control over the camera. There's one frame. You can't see what you're filming a lot of the time until you get back into like wherever you're staying, or you get back like to your home base. So it's you have no control over whether you should redo something, or how the shot actually turned out, or if the camera overheated. And in the edit as well, I had to really rely on an amazing team of people who could tolerate me and understand what I wanted, and be like, please, can you create it like this and make it move like that? And no, the fish are too small now, not too big. And like, it's just normally I would do all those things myself. And so it was more like patience of having to learn how to articulate the things, the vision, and then work with a team to have them bring your vision to life.
Yeah. Fantastic. That's really informative. I think just the last thing I'm going to do is ask you each just to say, what are you working on now, so that we can all anticipate what we're going to see later. I want to just say.
Well, two projects that were actually put on hiatus for the documentary. One is called Preface of a Gray. It's based on Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, and it's a spatial audio retelling of that story from the moment that this portrait is created to the moment of its destruction and Dorian's death. It was developed at a residency already for live. Most spatial audio I do is for live performances, and so I would like to keep that format, but I'm also exploring what that would be like, either as a, augmented audio experience that you can experience in your living room, or a VR experience where, you're purposely put in this darker environment to really allow the sounds to come through. The space that it was in was 4-story black box theater with 150 speakers. So really, to just allow someone to sit inside of a horror story, looking to get back into that.
Wow, sounds amazing.
Well, this, as I shared before, this is one episode of a series.
Okay.
So we are working on the series right now, and we are shooting in September, actually. So we are like just in the middle of the
very good.
scripts and pre-production and everything. And yes, this is like
Yeah.
VR and flat, so it's 10 episodes, and we are in the process of this.
Fantastic. And you?
I am still in development of like 2 ideas, looking at creating more of an installation type of experience, but looking at how people identified with locations, and like, for instance, like the lake, bodies of water, natural places, pre-colonial times in Africa before we became nations, and what the previous nations were versus what we have now. So I'm thinking of looking at that, maybe like a journey through a river, or playing with that, and sort of looking also at the experience of me as an African traveling in my continent, and the different experiences I've had versus other countries and different regions.
Yeah.
So trying to make that experience and put other people in that experience, make a game or something.
Yes. Fantastic. So we've got plenty to look forward to, don't we? So I just want to thank all the artists for taking the time to talk to us, and definitely see their work.